For years, we've watched the Brown family slowly fracture, splinter, and finally break apart. On the surface, the division seemed obvious, a tale of loyalty and betrayal stretched across a decade of television. On one side were the original three wives, Mary, Janelle, and Christine, along with their 13 children, a large, chaotic, and tightly knit clan. On the other side, Robyn, the fourth wife and the apparent favorite, and her 5 children, who seemed to exist in a separate, protected bubble. The split felt stark, like two different families masquerading as one. We assumed the tension was external, a siege on Robyn's fortress by the other wives and their outspoken children. But what if we were wrong? What if the real threat to Kody and Robyn's carefully curated world wasn't coming from outside the Shira shadow, but from within? What if, as the old horror movie trope warns, the call was coming from inside the house? According to whispers in fan forums and rumors passed from source to source, one of Robyn's older daughters, either Rora or Breanna, may have secretly reconnected with Christine. This isn't just a casual reunion, it's alleged to be strategic. The claim is that this daughter has been feeding Christine inside information about the true dynamics in Kody and Robyn's home. Everything, the raw behavior, the private rants, the unfiltered opinions could be being relayed to the one person Kody feels betrayed by the most. For years, Kody has built a narrative of himself as a loving patriarch under siege, a devoted husband and father whose family was torn apart by jealousy and bitterness. Robyn's home was presented as a sanctuary, the last bastion of loyalty amidst chaos. If even a shred of this rumor is true, that sanctuary was already compromised from within. It suggests a quiet rebellion led by a young woman who values truth over the carefully orchestrated illusions surrounding her. To understand why one of Robyn's daughters might risk everything, it helps to examine the environment she grew up in. The household, far from typical, resembled a high-control environment, fostering dependency rather than loyalty. Kody's personality, amplified and enabled by Robyn, dominated the family. The isolation, infantilization, and strict rules created pressure points. The infamous CO rules were a stark example of this. Control clothing changes after leaving the house, sanitizing mail and groceries, quarantining for days after minimal outside contact. These measures went beyond public health concerns. They were loyalty tests. While Janelle's children were vilified for maintaining social connections, Robyn's children became the model of obedience. But such strict control comes at a cost, especially for late teens like Rora and Breanna. It fosters fear, dependency, and a longing for autonomy. Even before the pandemic, the signs were clear. The ear-piercing incident with Aurora illustrates the family dynamic perfectly. At 18, Aurora's simple wish to pierce her ears became a traumatic ordeal. Robyn purchased a home kit, and Kody personally performed the procedure. The moment wasn't about Aurora. It was about control. Her panic became Kody's performance, a demonstration of authority over a grown daughter's body. The move from Las Vegas to Flagstaff compounded the isolation. In Vegas, Robyn's children had siblings and a community. In Flagstaff, they were secluded on a sprawling property, far from extended family and social support. The pandemic intensified this, keeping Aurora, Breanna, and Dayton cut off from peers, family, and independence for years. While other young adults explored the world, they remained confined, their autonomy tightly monitored. Human nature makes rebellion inevitable. The drive for independence doesn't disappear, it simmers, building pressure until it finds an outlet. Like the Duggar children, who eventually spoke out against a highly controlled environment, Robyn's daughters could similarly reach a breaking point. A young adult witnessing hypocrisy, control, and isolation will eventually seek freedom. This theory suggests that one of Robyn's daughters has done exactly that, acting not out of malice, but from a desperate desire for truth and connection. The alleged act itself reads like a domestic thriller. Picture a recent holiday in the Shira Chateau, Thanksgiving or Christmas. Kody attempts to project a perfect family, but underneath he seethes with anger. A seemingly innocent comment triggers a meltdown. Kody launches into an unfiltered tirade, blaming Christine, the other wives, and any children who defy his control. Robyn plays her familiar role, soothing and validating, while one of the older daughters quietly records the chaos. Her hands shake, her heart races. She isn't spying for malice. She is documenting the truth. This recording, sent to Christine, could be evidence of Kody's raw behavior, captured at its most unfiltered. Why would she take this risk? The answer lies in the stark contrast between her life and that of her half-sisters, Isabel and Truly, who thrive under Christine's care. Isabel, recovering from scoliosis, experienced freedom, care, and autonomy. Truly enjoys a life outside the bubble of Kody's control. The daughter in Flagstaff, meanwhile, remains monitored, infantilized, and isolated. Her act of sending the recording is not aggression, it's a plea for connection. A way of aligning with the side of the family that represents freedom. Even subtle digital breadcrumbs hint at her divided loyalty. A brief social media interaction alike, quickly removed, could signal internal conflict and yearning for connection. Beyond the fortress walls, this tiny slip fuels speculation that the daughter's allegiance is not where Kody believes it to be. The discovery of such a mole would devastate Kody. Loyalty is his measure of success, the currency of his identity. To find that devotion within Robin's household as a facade would shatter the narrative he's crafted. He would likely respond with rage, interrogation, and exile, framing the daughter as a traitor and Christine as the orchestrator. Robin would face an impossible choice: side with her child or maintain loyalty to Kody, balancing maternal instinct against survival within the household's power structure. For the daughter, the consequences would be severe. She could be exiled, shunned, or silenced. Her heroic act of exposing truth would come at immense personal cost: alienation from her family and the home she's known her entire life. Yet, in her defiance, she would also become a pivotal figure in the Brown family saga. Whistleblower who could validate the experiences of those who were silenced for years. This leads to the moral dilemma: should she release the tapes? On one hand, Kody and his family have invited the public into their lives, monetizing their drama. The recordings could correct years of false narratives and vindicate those wronged. On the other hand, broadcasting a private moment of emotional crisis could inflict lasting pain on Robin and her other children. The act blurs the line between truth-telling and violation of privacy. Ultimately, the daughter holds a digital key that could either reveal the truth or unleash irreversible family upheaval. She stands at a crossroads, balancing courage, morality, and personal sacrifice. Is she a whistleblower or a traitor? A champion of truth or a destroyer of familial bonds? The answer is complex, reflecting not just her choices, but the very nature of the world she was forced to navigate. On the surface, the divisions were clear: a story of loyalty and betrayal stretching across a decade of television. On one side were the original three wives, Mary, Janelle, and Christine, and their 13 children, a sprawling, tightly knit clan. On the other, Robin, the fourth wife and the apparent favorite, and her 5 children, living in what seemed like a separate, protected world. It was almost as if two families were pretending to be one. Most of us assumed the tension came from outside: a siege on Robin's household by the other wives and their outspoken kids. But what if the real threat wasn't outside at all? What if, as the old horror story goes, the danger was coming from inside the house? Rumors circulating in fan forums suggest that one of Robin's older daughters, either Rora or Breanna, may have quietly reconnected with Christine. And this isn't just a casual visit or friendly message, it's said to be intentional. The theory claims she's been sharing inside information about life in Kody and Robin's home, his private rants, his frustrations, the unfiltered reality that only a child in the house could witness. For years, Kody has portrayed himself as the loving patriarch under siege, a devoted husband and father whose family was torn apart by jealousy and resentment. He and Robin presented their home as a safe, loyal sanctuary. But if even part of this rumor is true, that sanctuary was already breached from within. It suggests that someone who has been expected to be obedient is quietly resisting, placing truth over the carefully constructed illusion of family harmony. To understand why a daughter might take such a risk, we have to look at the environment she grew up in. Robin's household was far from typical. It functioned more like a high-control setting, where independence was restricted and obedience was demanded. Kody's personality, reinforced by Robin, dominated the home. Rules and routines were strict, isolation was enforced, and autonomy was stripped away under the guise of protection and care. A glaring example of this control came during the pandemic, with the infamous CO rules. Clothing had to be changed after leaving the house, mail and groceries were sanitized, and anyone who had contact with the outside world faced a 2-week quarantine. These rules went far beyond public health, they were tests of loyalty. While Janelle's kids were criticized for wanting a no, human beings naturally crave independence, especially as they move from adolescence into adulthood. When that drive is repeatedly stifled, it doesn't disappear, it simmers beneath the surface, building pressure until it finds an outlet. For teens like Aurora and Breanna, the constant control, isolation, and infantilization created exactly that kind of pressure. For a while, obedience may have seemed like the safest option, the way to keep peace in a household dominated by Kody's personality. But over time, the contradictions between what they were told and what they observed became impossible to ignore. They watched their half-siblings on Christine's side thriving, living freely, going to school, participating in social life, making choices. Meanwhile, they remained under constant surveillance, restricted in every way. Their home may have been luxurious, but it functioned as a gilded cage. This contrasts the lives they saw through social media, and the reality they experienced every day created a growing sense of injustice and dissonance. The theory suggests that this growing awareness eventually turned into quiet rebellion. One of Robin's daughters may have become a mole, documenting what was happening inside the Shira shadow. She could have recorded conversations, private outbursts, and moments when Kody's persona of the calm, patient patriarch slipped, revealing his true temper and frustrations. These recordings, sent to Christine, would provide an unfiltered view of life inside Robin's home. The same life Kody claimed was orderly and loyal. The alleged act of recording wasn't likely premeditated. It wasn't an act of aggression or calculated betrayal. It was a survival instinct, a way to validate her own experiences and gather proof that the environment she lived in was as controlling and toxic as it felt. The recordings would serve as evidence that she wasn't imagining the extreme rules, the paranoia, or the manipulation she had been subjected to for years. This theory becomes even more compelling when considering digital breadcrumbs. Small moments on social media, a fleeting like on a post by a sibling living with Christine. A subtle interaction could suggest cracks in the carefully maintained facade of loyalty. Fans have scrutinized these tiny actions, reading them as signals that someone inside the house was quietly resisting. In a world where obedience was demanded and independence punished, these small gestures become monumental, silent messages of solidarity and rebellion. If the mole theory is true, it represents a turning point not just for Robin's daughter, but for the entire Brown family. It would mean the control Kody and Robin believed they had over their household was an illusion. The rebellion comes not from the outsiders, not from the Ogwives or the outspoken children, they come from within. From the very person Kody assumed would remain loyal above all else. This scenario also highlights the intense psychological pressures within Robin's household. Kody's dominance, reinforced by Robin, created a system where obedience was demanded. Fear was instilled and individuality was suppressed. When that system begins to fail, when a child starts to act independently, the reaction is often explosive. For a daughter to record and share private moments is not just a personal risk. It challenges the very identity of the patriarch he's spent years cultivating. If the recordings were discovered, the impact on Kody would be profound. Loyalty isn't just valued in his world, it's the foundation of his identity. To learn that one of Robin's daughters, the child he raised under his strict rules, had secretly documented and shared his unfiltered anger would shatter the narrative he's carefully built. In his mind, the betrayal wouldn't just be personal, it would be existential. Kody's first reaction would likely be fury and paranoia, not reflection. He would see the daughter as a traitor, a spy working for Christine. He might accuse Christine of orchestrating the situation, manipulating his child from afar to turn her against him. He could interrogate his household, demand phone access, question every child, and create an atmosphere of suspicion and fear. The sanctuary he thought he controlled would transform into a courtroom with him acting as judge, jury, and prosecutor. Robin would face an impossible choice. On one hand, there is her child, her flesh and blood, whom she has nurtured and protected for years. Maternal instinct would urge her to defend her daughter, to shield her from the father's wrath. On the other hand, Robin's identity, her emotional stability, and her place in the household are tied to Kody for over a decade. She has validated his decisions, reinforced his ego, and maintained the loyalty of her children to preserve her marriage. Choosing her child over Kody would risk her position, her security, and possibly even the cohesion of her remaining family under his control. For the daughter, the consequences would be devastating. Based on Kody's past patterns, there would likely be no forgiveness. Garrison and Gabriel, for example, weren't simply argued, but they were effectively excommunicated when they defied him. The daughter would face similar consequences: exile from the Shira shadow, isolation from her siblings, and the declaration that she was no longer part of the family. In Kody's eyes, this act would be necessary to protect the rest of the household from her poison. Yet in this hypothetical scenario, the daughter also emerges as a figure of immense courage. By recording and sharing the truth, she validates the experiences of those silenced for years. She risks everything: her home, her relationships, her safety for the sake of truth. The recordings would serve as a rare glimpse into the unfiltered reality behind the polished, televised version of the Brown family. The moral complexity of her actions is striking. On one hand, releasing the recordings could correct a false narrative, exposing decades of manipulation and control. For viewers, it would be vindication for those who suffered under Kody's strict rules, a public reckoning with the truth. On the other hand, it would also weaponize a private family moment, inflicting lasting pain on Robin, the other children, and even Kody himself. It raises the question, is exposing the truth worth the human cost? In this story, the daughter occupies a precarious position, both hero and pariah. Her act of rebellion could dismantle the illusions Kody has built, but it comes at enormous personal cost. She stands as a whistleblower in a high-stakes household drama, balancing the pursuit of justice against the destruction of her own familial bonds. This crossroads forces viewers and the daughter herself to confront a difficult question. When truth collides with loyalty, which should prevail? Should private moments remain hidden for the sake of family, or should deception be exposed, no matter the fallout? The answer is neither simple nor comfortable, and it speaks as much about us, the audience, as it does about her daughter. In the final act of this hypothetical drama, the daughter's world would be irrevocably changed. By stepping forward with the truth, she ceases to be just a child in the household. She becomes a symbol of courage, of resistance, and of the cost of living under extreme control. Her rebellion might bring long overdue clarity to the public, offering validation to Christine, Chanel, and their children, who have spent years questioning the narrative Kody presented to the world. But there is no clean victory for her. The act of exposing the truth would likely sever her ties with the only home she has ever known in Flagstaff. She may be cast out, a pariah in the eyes of her father, and forced to navigate life without the protection or comfort of the family she grew up in. Even Robin, torn between her child and her husband, may ultimately side with Kody, leaving the daughter isolated in a world she has only glimpsed from afar. Her heroism is inseparable from her tragedy. She risks financial security, emotional stability, and familial relationships to shed light on a system of control and manipulation. She becomes a whistleblower, a rare voice from inside the inner circle, willing to face immense personal consequences for the sake of truth. For fans of the show, she represents the long-awaited reckoning, the confirmation that the curated image of the Brown household was only part of the story. At the same time, her decision raises profound moral and ethical questions. Should private moments of anger and emotional turmoil, even from a public figure, be broadcast for all to see? Does the pursuit of truth justify the deep personal harm inflicted on those involved? The answer is complex, highlighting the tension between accountability and privacy, between justice and compassion. Ultimately, the daughter occupies a liminal space, both celebrated and sacrificed. She embodies the difficult reality that uncovering the truth often comes at an enormous personal cost. Her story challenges viewers to reflect not only on the Brown family, but also on their own understanding of loyalty, freedom, and morality. The sheer shadow, the stage of her upbringing, would become both a symbol of oppression and a monument to the risks she took to assert her autonomy. Her actions could dismantle decades of deception, yet the personal fallout may be irreversible. In standing up for truth, she transforms from a passive participant in a controlled environment into a powerful, if tragic, figure whose choices reshape the narrative forever. As viewers, we are left with a haunting question: if we were in her position, would we have the courage to speak out, knowing the cost could be everything we hold dear? Her story, real or hypothetical, forces us to confront the complexities of family, loyalty, and the price of truth, and in doing so, leaves a lasting impression long after the